Welcome, dear learners. Today we are going to discuss about the wildfire disaster management. Before we go for the wildfire disaster management, we have to discuss about what are the wildfires and what are the factors that lead uh, for the development of wildfires. So basically, the word fire has been evolved from the Greek word that means pyra, which means growing embers, like the flames. And the fire is actually heat and light that results from the three elements. So basically, the three elements should combine for creation of the fire. So first one is the fuel. Fuel may be the any kind of wood material, leaves, twigs, or any kind of fuel. So another factor that is essential for the fire is oxygen. So keeping in view, when two these components meet, the fire is not created. We need some ignition temperature to create the fire. Like we use lighter for lighting up the gas stove, so it creates spark. So the spark gives the ignition to the fuel in combination with oxygen. So the same principle also applies here. The three elements like fuel, oxygen, and the source of combination or source of heat or ignition should be there so that the fire is created. So the other elements that determine the fire are the kind of weather, presence of fuel, landscape. There are many other factors that are responsible, but those factors are the secondary factors. The primary factors are oxygen, heat, and fuel. These are called the triangle of the fire. So the forest fire is basically defined as an enclosed and freely spreading combustion that consumes the natural fuels. So natural fuels are here the forests, which are mainly composed of wood, twigs, underground, organic material like peat, moss, or grasses. So when this forest fire happens, it spreads and freely and consumes all the natural fuels. And combustion may be the other word of the fire, but the combustion is in controlled manner. It's not the freely like the wildfires. The when fire burns out of control, what I was saying earlier, when the combustions happen out of control, that is called the wildfire. So almost everyone basically knows the forest fire looks like. What is it composed of? Basically three elements. When the forest fire happens, it creates gas, flames, heat, and smoke. So the fire gas is created by the combustion of the basically the fuel, that is the wood. Basically these are the I mean the gas that is created from the combustion of the forest material, that is not visible from the naked eye. These are many gases depending upon the composition of the wood. It mainly composed of carbon dioxide, and carbon monoxide also may be there. And if the the composition of the wood is something that can also lead for the release of many other toxic gases. So other component is the flame, that is basically the light that is that we can see from our naked eye. Uh, so as long as the three elements are present that creates the forest fire, these flames can be seen. And the heat, basically, it is one of the important component of the forest fire. Heat, it makes easily the forest fire spread. When a fire happens, it also creates heat, and from that heat, uh, the other portion of the forest fuel is consumed in presence of oxygen. So this part of fire, we can feel the warmth, basically the infrared component of electromagnetic spectrum. So it is around, the temperature could be around 1100 degrees centigrade. So other component that is released from the forest fire is smoke that is quite visible from our eyes. It basically consists of the fine powders, solid particles, or some gases, or black carbon, or the unburned material, particulate matter that creates the smoke. And definitely this smoke creates the breathing problems. Wherever the deforestation happens by the burning of the forests, these gases, this smoke travels from one country to another country, and definitely it creates the breathing problems, particularly in winters when there is temperature inversion and there is very less dilution of the air, and the heavier air parcels get trapped, and it can aggravate the health issues if it is combined with the forest fire, which is mostly composed of the smoke. And before going further, we should discuss about what are the various kinds of fuels that can lead to the forest fires. So, in forests, there are the fuels are of various types. For example, ground fuels. This involves all combustible materials below the loose litter of the soil. Basically, the upper portion of the soil, that is organic portion, the material that is embedded within that portion. Maybe it may be consisting of the humus at various stages of degradation or decomposition. It may be the trees or shrubs or roots underground, muck or peat. Peat is basically the stage of decomposition. Basically, the ground fuel always supports the glowing composition, combustion, and not the flame. Basically, it leads to a smoldering effect. Basically, the forest fire, one of the forest fire is smoldering. It burns inside. It only creates the smoke. It doesn't. It is not visible as we can see. The flames are coming out of the fire, burning of the wood. But here, in this case, the flames are not visible. The second one is the surface fuels, basically, which consists of the tree leaves, dried tree leaves, basically fine litter, grasses, weeds, ferns, herbaceous plant that is basically dried, bushes, seedlings, saplings of the trees, fine dead wood on the floor, many other things. So this also is an important. This can create the surface forest fires that can spread from one location to other location, but on the surface, not above. Then another one is the aerial fuels. It basically combustible, dead, or live material located in or under the story, means basically it is the upper portion of the surface of the forest is basically consist of dead plants, branches, foliage, or dead logs, lichens, the mosses that grow on the tree trunks, and it basically leads to the crowning fires that spread through the crown of one tree to another tree, and that is very controllable kind of forest fire. Then we have discussed about the forest fuels. Now we are going to discuss about the types of the forest fire. So based on the material on the forest fuels, the forest fires can also be categorized in few of the types, like depending upon the nature, size, spreading speed, and behavior. The forest fires can be categorized like the forest surface fires. These basically burn underground, undergrowth, basically the grasses, dead material on the floor of the forests, loose debris, vegetation. So it spreads, like you can see in the pictures, the grasses, these are burning on the forest floor. And second one is the underground fire that I was discussing earlier, that the humus at the various stage of the degradation, that forest fire is underground, Visually we cannot see this kind of fire, but we can see the smoke coming up, coming out of the floor of the forests. Basically is a low intense and consuming organic material beneath the surface litter, and it's basically called the smoldering. It also leads to the burning of the roots of the trees, and it slowly kills all the trees because the smoke that devotes the roots from the oxygen supply. Then these fires spread very slowly, and in most of the cases become very hard to detect and control because we cannot see them visually, and we don't know where the fire is going on, and we cannot control them. And they can go for the months. And other terminology for this type of fire is mug fire, basically the peat which is burning under the surface of the forest floor. Another one is the ground fire. These fires are the subsurface organic material like duff layers in Arctic tundra and taiga, and organic soils and swamps, bogs. There is no clear distinction between the underground and ground fires, but smoldering, the underground fires sometimes change into the ground fires. Basically, we can see some kind of flames coming out of the ground or subsurface. They are more damaging than the surface fires, as they can destroy the vegetation completely. And then the crowning is visibly we can see the crowning from the distinct places, the basically the unpredictable that burn the tops of the trees that spread very rapidly. Here the surface fires are not much dangerous as compared to the crown fires. In most of the cases, these fires are invariably ignited by the surface fires. Sometimes these surface fires can lead to the crowns, but most of the time, these surface fires could not lead to the crowns. So this is a one of the most spectacular kind of forest fire, which usually advance to the top to down, basically because of certain reasons like lightning or rubbing of the trees because of the winds, the branch rubbing, and because of the friction. It creates the heat and sparks that can lead to the burning of the top of the trees, and this fire can travel downwards, and that can lead to the surface fires or ground or underground fires. In dense conifer stands with the brisk wind, because of the winds of the friction which I was telling you earlier, the friction of branches or the trunks of trees that can lead to the crown fires. And the firestorm among the forest fire, the firestorm spread very rapidly because with the winds, this forest fire, the crowns can travel from one location to other location very easily. And the flames fly out from the base, and burning embers spew out of top and can spread to the larger location. And temperature could lead to around 2000 degree Fahrenheit. So these are very dangerous to control. So there is some kind of vocabulary that we use in the forest fire, like a fire is said to be running when it is spreading rapidly. So it's called a running fire. A fire is smoldering when it burns out a flame or barely spreading. When it is, the flames are not visible. Without flames, that is called smoldering. A fire is torching when it moves from one crown to another crown, in another fire into the crowns. Basically, the top of the trees are burn from another tree because one crown can spread the fire to the another tree crown. Then a flare up is a sudden acceleration of the forest spread or intensity of the relative short duration. Like we use the firecrackers, it makes a flare kind of the, and it makes spread the high intensity of the forest fire very rapidly. Then forest fire may be called a creeping when it is spreading slowly with low flames, basically the surface fire, we can say, like creeping kind of thing. And a fire is said to be spotting when it is producing sparks. When a fire burns, it creates sparks, and that sparks travel to another location because of the winds, and it creates fire at that place where the sparks basically, travel. So it creates another patch of the forest fire that can be called as spotting. Then it is called crowning when it spreads from tree to tree, usually in the congestion in very high dense kind of forests. And it's called blow up, on the other hand, a dramatic change in behavior of the whole fire that points rapid transition to a severe fires. When a surface fire or crown fire that can lead to the forest storms that that can be called as blow up. Then we are going to discuss about what are the various causes of the forest fire. So this can be divided into two sections, like natural and anthropogenic. First, natural causes like lighting. Because of the lighting, the it can create the forest fire basically on the crown of the forests, on the crown of the trees. Second is the friction of the rolling stones, rubbing of the dry bamboo clamps, volcanic eruptions. Basically, because of the wind, the branches of the trees can rub and create a friction, and then that friction can lead to the forest fires. So there is the forest fire only happen because the forest fire, because of the natural reasons, only happen, the percentage is only 5% because of the natural causes, but 95% of the forest fires that happen because of the anthropogenic. So the anthropogenic causes can be categorized under the deliberate causes and accidental causes. So first one is deliberate. In deliberate, the most important, and that is called shifting cultivation or geom cultivation, and or it can be called slash and burn, where a patch of land for the agriculture activity is burned, and then the agriculture activity is done on that patch of land, and for 3 4 years, when the fertility of the land is degraded, then the patch is abandoned and another patch of the forest is burned, and same activity. So this can lead to the forest fire. I mean, a patch of land, when it is burned for the agriculture activity, this is called shifting cultivation, and this is a deliberate attempt. And then another is flush growth of tindo leaves, the flush growth of tindo, but basically the various kinds of the herbs that are grown. Forest fires are deliberately done to clear the floor of the forest for growing of such leaves, to have good growth of grass and fodder. Basically, for the feeding the cattle, we have to grow more grasses and the fodder, so we burn the trees. To settle scores with department, forest department, or personal rivalry, that can, like arson, which deliberately burn the settlements or the forests. Or it can be because of the clearing of the paths by the villagers, basically for transportation, to encroach upon the forest land, basically in the community which are living adjacent to the forest area, they can burn the forests for encroaching the land, maybe for the settlements or for the agriculture. Concealing illicit filling, tribal traditions are there sometimes that can lead to the forest fires, and these are the deliberate attempts. Now, the accidental attempts are like the collection of non-timber firewood produce. Sometimes the forest fire happen accidentally, like collection of non-timber forest produce, burning of the farm residues in adjacent to the forest area, if we have the agriculture land, driving away wild animals. That has been an ancient technique to protect one by from the wild animals. Throwing burning BDs or cigarettes, basically when we go for the excursion or outing to the forest, sometimes we out of the passion, we will light a cigarette or BD and then throw the uh, them on the forest floor, and that can also lead to the forest fires. Campfires, sometime some sparks from the vehicle exhaust, sparks from the transformers if a transformer is adjacent to the forest, and uncontrolled prescribed burning. Sometimes we are burning the fuel for creating the charcoal. Sometimes that burning gets uncontrolled, and that can lead to the forest fires. And also resin trapping. So these are some causes why forest fires are happening. So before discussing the adverse impact, the Forest Survey of India, as per the Forest Survey of the India, 50% of the forests in India are prone to the forest fires, in which occasional fires happen only 43%, and frequent fires happen 5.16%, and heavy fires, very heavy fires are only 0.14%, and very heavy fires are around 0.484%. So this is the data from the Forest Survey of India. So what are the adverse impacts of the forest fires? First, it leads to the loss of valuable timber resources. Basically, the timber for the construction purpose, which we get from the forest, that is one of the basic ecosystem service of the forests. It gives us the timber from which we can construct our houses, settlements, all that kind of thing. Impact forest fire on the ecosystem, forest fire ecosystem. So the forest ecosystem is very important. It has very important role, for example, for creating the habitats for wild animals. It act as a hydrological modulator. So if the forest fire happens, so it impacts the ecosystem. It can lead to the degradation of water catchments areas, resulting to loss of water. So we have loss of catchments that are particularly in the forest area where the rainfall or snowfall happens. So forest floor is basically have a lot of vegetation. Can the also the tree roots that bind the soil together leads to the infiltration of the water into the groundwater, and also it can improve the groundwater recharge capacity. So if the forest fire happens, this quality, this service of the forest is degraded. Then what I was earlier saying, the loss of wildlife habitat and depletion of the wildlife, basically it can lead to the loss of biodiversity in the area, floral and as well as faunal biodiversity. Loss of natural vegetation and reduction in forest cover, that is obvious when there is a burning of vegetation like grasses or the ground surface vegetation or the upper surface like the big trees. It can lead global warming. Because of the forest fire, there is the release of carbon dioxide, which is the primary greenhouse gas that elevates the global warming, and that can increase the concentration of the carbon dioxide in atmosphere, and also it reduces the carbon capture capacity of the forests. Then change in the microclimate, because if we know that at a particular area where the forest is very dense, the forest change the microclimate of area. It makes it cool, very high kind of humidities in the atmosphere because of the forests. It can lead to the soil erosion. More floods will come because we have no ground cover that can bind the soil, and it can lead to the soil erosion and also the floods. Deteriorating of the biological environment, because of this, the lots of the gases and smokes are coming out. So it reduces the quality of the environment. Adverse impacts on the health system, socio-economic impacts, because various communities that are dependent on the forests, uh, they derive various benefits like food, fiber, firewood from the forest. So their economic status is degraded, carbon sequestration potential is degraded, and overall reducing the tourism value. When the forest is burned, no one going to visit the burned forests because it is not very uh, like what we say a scenic kind of thing. So what are the managements? How can we manage the forest fires? There are various ways how can we manage the forest fire, like the fire protection plans must be carried out for preparedness or response activities. The first is to assess the threat to the human life or property forests because of the various that can lead to the forest fires. And then the preparedness for the forest suppression must reflect the variable nature of the fire dangers, developing appropriate modern early warning capability of wide-lined fire danger, initiate prevention activities to reduce the hazards and potential losses. We must ensure um, a major fire suppression response that reflects the threat. The safety of fire fighting personnel should be also a prime objective after the public safety and environment safety. Must formalize a single management structure for all personnel. Trained, well-equipped, assessed, accredited personnel must be appointed that are employed for the fire fighting system, striving for consistent funding that enables fire managers to adequately meet the goals of the guiding principles, safety and efficiency. So these are all the fire protection plans that can be employed for the wildfire management. Another is fuel management. Basically, one of the three components, that is the fuel, basically the wood, litter, leaves, dried branches, moss, peat, that is basically the fuel. So out of these three components, fuel is very important. Then we can, if we can manage this fuel, we can reduce the vulnerability of the area. Uh, by various techniques like fuel management program need to be planned to provide protection to the human life property by reducing the potential hazards. Here we can also employ the GIS GPS system. From the satellite data, we can see which portion of the forest is very vulnerable to the forest fires, and we can manage the fuel that we can collect the forest floor litter, and we can safely dispose of that forest by reducing fuel through mechanical and physical means that was I discussing. We can reduce the fuel concentration using an or excluding prescribed fire basic scientific knowledge, basing prescribed burning operation on clear defined objective and minimize and prescriptions provide and safe working environment, minimize the risk of fire escape. These are various fire fuel, basically the fuel management strategies. And the last one is the environmental protection. Forest fire can be immense loss to the environment, as we see that it degrades the environment, it creates a soil erosion, flooding, and it impacts the health system. So the fire management activity should be based upon the good scientific study. We should not go in haphazard manner, and these activities should be planned and conducted in environmentally sensitive manner, considering forest regime and forest management activity appropriate to maintain the vigor and diversity in the population of species, communities of an area, indigenous flora and fauna. Appropriate measures to be taken to safeguard water quality, quantity, and also ensure minimize impact on fire management activities on streams, springs, soaks, swamps, ground bodies, and basically we should the that the water bodies catchment area, we should reduce the degradation of those water bodies because of the forest fire. And landscape values, geomorphological features, cultural, historical sites considered when planning the operation. We should keep all these things in consideration while we are planning the environmental protection. Soil being protected by measures which prevent inappropriate destruction of its physical and chemical properties, or which promote the stabilization of bare or disturbed earth flow disturbances. And last one is indigenous flora and fauna being protected following wildfire suppression by measures which promote reestablishment of ecological processes existing prior to wildfires. So this was all how can we manage the forest fires. And last one is the capacity building and strengthening the early warning. Basically, we should have a good capacity building in the country. We should have a good trained official that basically are in the Department of the Forest that have various kinds of equipments and infrastructure for firefighting. And early warning system should be based on to develop a global warning system for vegetation fire, basically kind of various tools like GIS, GPS. We can employ that kind of thing in here, and to develop an information network to quickly disseminate early warning of fire danger globally to local communities. So the kind of warning systems, warning centers should be established to develop a historical record of global fire. Basically, the risk should be calculated in here based on the probability and the possibility of the wildfires at a particular community, and then we should go for validation and strategic planning for that risk. And then design and implement technology transfer program to provide the training to global, regional, national community for early warning system operation methods, for local to global calibration of the system, use of system to prevent, preparedness, detection, and various appropriate fire. Basically, these all the management plans come under the preparedness, mitigation, and prevention. So uh, all the forest fire that happens, first of all we should be focusing on these kind of things, that the forest fire should not happen. We should do the fuel management, early warning systems, and then when forest fire happens, then what are the various strategies they had that I have discussed earlier. Fire protection plans, how can we equip ourselves the minimum impacts from the minimum impacts of the forest fire. So this was all about the forest fires.